Dolph Ziggler's career in the WWE can only be described as a roller coaster. A man who, despite seeing it all in the WWE, never truly felt like a top star, and WWE were always hesitant of pulling the trigger on him despite many opportunities to do so. Dolph Ziggler may go down as one of the biggest what-ifs in WWE history, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so like and subscribe and let's talk about it. Let's talk about Dolph Ziggler in the WWE. On the 15th of September 2008, Dolph Ziggler would make his WWE debut. Well, sort of. Dolph Ziggler already had a WWE run as Nikki as part of the Spirit Squad, but after the Spirit Squad dissolved in 2006, Nikki was sent back to developmental. Literally. And while most of the other Spirit Squad members were let go, Nikki was retained, meaning WWE clearly saw something in him, and his re-debut as Dolph Ziggler in 2008 was an entirely different package to what we'd seen from him in the Spirit Squad. It was a less than stellar start for Dolph Ziggler, as he was still coming up and he was mainly used in the lower card and often jobbing in his first 6 months in the company, and he was still also making appearances on FCW whilst he was on Raw. It was when he was drafted to SmackDown in April 2009 that he would start to get a bit more of a push and gain some momentum, with the sleeper hold being built up as one of his finishers and him picking up wins on SmackDown using it. He would have his first pay-per-view match at the Bash 2009 in June, beating the Great Khali in a no DQ match, and this would earn him his first title shot at Rey Mysterio's Intercontinental title at Night of Champions. Rey Mysterio would retain in what was a solid showing for Ziggler, and Ziggler would earn himself a rematch at SummerSlam, where once again, Rey Mysterio retained in a solid match, and these matches got Ziggler over. People wanted Ziggler to win the title. A good start to life on Friday Night SmackDown, as Dolph Ziggler would stay around the IC title scene, and 2010 would be a very exciting year for Dolph Ziggler. He took part in the Money in the Bank match at WrestleMania 26 in his first Mania match, where he had another great performance, and 2010 would also see the beginning of an alliance that is synonymous with Ziggler's career, and that is of course his alliance and on-screen romance with Vicky Guerrero, which began in June of 2010 and would usher in a new era of Dolph Ziggler's career, as not too long after aligning with Vicky, he would defeat Kofi Kingston for his IC title on the 6th of August 2010 SmackDown, for his first title win in the WWE. And he would have numerous defenses against Kofi Kingston thereafter, where he would retain every single time using nefarious means, and also during his first reign as IC champion, he would face Daniel Bryan, who was the US champion, at Bragging Rights that year in a non-title champion versus champion match, a match that Daniel Bryan won, but was also one of the best matches of the year without a doubt. And he would close out the year with defenses against Caval at Survivor Series, and then against Kofi and Jack Swagger at TLC in a ladder match, which I just do not remember at all. However, on the first SmackDown of 2011 on January 7th, he would lose the title back to Kofi Kingston, with people wondering what was next for Ziggler, as this was a very sudden title change. And sure enough, he would bounce back extremely quick, as that very same night, Ziggler would win a 4-way match to become #1 contender for the World Heavyweight title, and would challenge Edge at the Royal Rumble, ultimately unsuccessfully. But himself and Edge would continue feuding, and it would get kinda crazy, as on the February 11th episode of SmackDown, Edge and Ziggler rematched, with Edge winning. However, he won using the spear, which had been banned the previous week, and so 3 days later on Raw, Ziggler was declared the World Heavyweight Champion. He was just given the belt, and that is the story of his first world title, which he lost back to Edge on the very same night. WWE 2011 booking, folks. After that, we would get this, remember this match graphic, and then Dolph Ziggler would team with Lay Cool once again, this time to take on John Morrison, Trish Stratus, and Snooki at Mania 27, with Ziggler's team losing from world champion to that in just 2 months. But once again, Ziggler bounced back quick, as he won his first US title at Capital Punishment from Kofi Kingston, and Ziggler would enjoy a nice lengthy mid-card title reign once again, as he held the title until the rest of the year, finally losing it on the final pay-per-view of the year, TLC, to Zack Ryder. Ziggler started 2012 in similar fashion to 2011, by challenging for the world title at the Royal Rumble, this time challenging Punk for the WWE title, and losing. He also had a similar WrestleMania, just being part of a throwaway tag. But hey, at least his team won this time. Fans were waiting for WWE to pull the trigger on Ziggler and were given a huge sign of hope when Ziggler got potentially the biggest win of his career, winning the World Heavyweight Championship Money in the Bank ladder match. And for the rest of the year, Ziggler would carry around the briefcase and be part of some big programs with the likes of Chris Jericho and Randy Orton, coming out on top of both feuds. And he would round out the year in huge fashion, beating John Cena in a ladder match at TLC after stealing AJ Lee from him. 2012 was a W year for Ziggler, and he still had the Money in the Bank briefcase going into 2013, as well as AJ Lee and of course Big E Langston by his side. Ziggler began 2013 feuding with returning foe Chris Jericho, and then himself and Langston would set their eyes on Tag Team Gold and would challenge Team Hell No at WrestleMania 29 for the gold, but would not win. However, Ziggler would see gold in the WWE very soon after, in fact the very next night, in a very big way. I'm of course talking about the time he cashed in his Money in the Bank contract on Alberto Del Rio and won the World Heavyweight title to one of the biggest pops in WWE history. The biggest moment of his career without a doubt, and maybe the best cash-in. Ziggler was set to make his first defense against Del Rio and Swagger at the next pay-per-view Extreme Rules, but Ziggler suffered a concussion and had to be off TV for a bit. Ziggler would finally return at the next pay-per-view Payback to defend the title against Alberto Del Rio, where a double turn would take place as Ziggler would have a never die spirit whilst Del Rio would target his head and win the match and the title. Ziggler's reign lasted 69 days with not a single successful defense. Ziggler and Del Rio would rematch at Money in the Bank, with Del Rio winning by DQ after AJ Lee attacked him, thus retaining. Dolph Ziggler would break up with AJ Lee on screen because of this, and Big E would turn on him following that, and just like that, Dolph Ziggler had lost everything. Himself and Caitlyn beat AJ Lee and Big E at SummerSlam, but after this, Ziggler was left treading water for a long while. The first half of 2014 would be really eventful for Ziggler. He was a body in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at Mania, as well as the Money in the Bank ladder match, but it was a Battle Royal at Battleground for the vacant Intercontinental title that would see Ziggler finish runner-up to The Miz, to the fans' dismay. This led to an IC title match at SummerSlam, with Ziggler winning and getting back on form, but the booking of his IC title run was really weird, so try to follow. Ziggler would drop the title back to Miz at the next pay-per-view, but then win it back himself the next night on Raw. Ziggler would then join Team WWE to face Team Authority at Survivor Series, and during the build-up lost his IC title to Luke Harper. But then, at Survivor Series, Ziggler would come out on top in a 3v1 situation to be the sole survivor for his team, and this felt like it was a star-making moment once again for Dolph Ziggler, who would also regain the IC title from Harper at the next pay-per-view TLC in an extremely underrated match, but then would begin 2015 by losing it to Bad News Barrett. At WrestleMania 31, he challenged for the belt again in a ladder match, which was also an awesome match, but of course he lost and ended his turbulent tale with the Intercontinental title for now. And what did he do for the rest of 2015, you're wondering? Well, less than a year after the star-making Survivor Series moment, Ziggler was now in a cocking storyline with Rusev and Lana. Cool. In 2016, Ziggler would find himself once again challenging for the IC title at Mania 32 in a ladder match and losing, but hey, this was probably the best match of the night, and shortly after entered into a feud with the newly called up Baron Corbin in a 3-month program that felt like it never ended and did nothing for either man. That year, Ziggler was drafted to SmackDown as the brand split had returned and another opportunity for Ziggler had presented itself. On the first Tuesday Night Live SmackDown, Ziggler became #1 contender for the world title and challenged Ambrose at SummerSlam, and though unsuccessful, he would then enter into a feud with The Miz again for his Intercontinental title, and this was coming at a time where The Miz was at his hottest, fresh off the infamous Talking Smack promo. Ziggler and Miz would face at Backlash, with Miz retaining, but Ziggler would then challenge Miz to a rematch at No Mercy, putting his career on the line, and in an incredible match and match of the year contender, Dolph Ziggler would win. Another star-making moment for Ziggler once again, one that is undone just 37 days later as Miz regained the title. How many times is this gonna happen? It's every single time. Ziggler would start 2017 by turning heel for the first time in 4 years, and he would be a body yet again at the Andre Battle Royal, and was the first feud for Shinsuke Nakamura when he was called up to SmackDown. I got to see them wrestle a dark match at the SmackDown After Mania, fun fact, but he lost to Shinsuke at Backlash and would take some time off TV afterwards. When he returned, he would debut a new gimmick where he would mock and imitate other wrestlers. It sucked, but surprisingly he would start feuding with Bobby Roode for his US title, and even more surprisingly would end up winning it at Clash of Champions in December. But then guess what happens on the very next SmackDown? He comes out, cuts a promo, says the fans don't deserve him as champion, puts the belt down, and just leaves. The title was vacated, and Ziggler was taken off TV. What? So there was talk of Ziggler actually leaving the company at this time, but hey, sure enough, he would return at number 30 in the Royal Rumble in what seemed like a really big return until he was eliminated after 2 minutes, and yeah, that whole storyline and vacating the title was for nothing, because guess what he'd end up doing at Mania? Being a body in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, of course. He was drafted to Raw following Mania, and on the June 18th episode of Raw, answered Seth Rollins' Intercontinental title open challenge, and shockingly won to become a 6-time champion. And now aligned with Drew McIntyre, Ziggler would defend against Rollins in an Iron Man match at Extreme Rules, but would lose it back to him at SummerSlam. This was a solid feud though. 2 weeks later though, himself and McIntyre beat the B-Team on Raw to win the Raw tag titles, his first tag title reign since the Spirit Squad days. But of course, this reign was absolutely short-lived, and they dropped them after less than a month to Rollins and Ambrose, and the year ended with Ziggler and McIntyre ending their alliance, and 2019 started with Ziggler making it to the final 3 in the Rumble, the furthest he's ever made it, and eliminating McIntyre during the match, but he would take some time off TV after this, being gone for 4 months and skipping WrestleMania. He probably found out he was in the Andre Battle Royal again. Upon his WWE return in May, he jumped into a feud with old foe Kofi Kingston for his WWE title, and they had multiple matches on pay-per-view, and of course Ziggler didn't win, but I enjoyed this feud and I found it nostalgic. Things started to get weird for Dolph Ziggler though, as his next pay-per-view appearances saw him losing in 17 seconds to Kevin Owens at Extreme Rules, and then being squashed by Goldberg at SummerSlam. And 2 weeks later on an episode of Raw, Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode would randomly team up and earn a Raw Tag Team title shot at Clash of Champions, which they won. They would dub themselves the Dirty Dogs, and hey, they might have been a completely random team thrown together for no good reason, but I liked these two guys, so I was cool with it. But of course, the reign lasted less than a month, and they lost the titles to the Viking Raiders. They would become just a regular team in the division all the way until 2020 when COVID struck and Bobby Roode couldn't travel. The team would have to go on hiatus as Dolph Ziggler would become a singles worker again, and his first feud back as a singles wrestler was his legendary feud with Otis, where Ziggler was trying to steal Mandy Rose from him, and he might have been able to steal AJ Lee from John Cena, but he couldn't steal Otis from Mandy Rose, and it culminated with Otis beating him at WrestleMania. Ziggler would float around as a singles wrestler and would meet old foe Drew McIntyre for his WWE title at Extreme Rules, but once again went unsuccessful. Eventually, Bobby Roode returned and the Dirty Dogs were back, and on the January 8, 2021 episode of SmackDown, the Dirty Dogs would beat the Street Profits to win the SmackDown tag titles, and this time they would get an actual tag reign. They'd hold it for about 3 months, even defending it successfully at Mania that year, but they lost to the Mysterios at Backlash. And after that, they were back to being a regular team for the rest of the year, and going into 2022, we would see Ziggler do something very shocking by appearing on NXT and making himself a challenger for the NXT title, which even more shockingly, he would win, winning it about a month later, and he would defend it against LA Knight and Bron Breakker, but ultimately lost it to Bron Breakker after 27 days, and his time in NXT was over just like that. And he'd spend the rest of the year jobbing as Robert Roode got injured and the Dirty Dogs effectively ended. 2023 would see much of the same, with the only difference being that his TV time had become a lot more occasional. He'd failed to win a single TV match in 2023, and after going undrafted, he was released in September, ending 19 years with the company. So when looking back at Dolph Ziggler's WWE career, like I said at the start of the video, the only way to really describe it is a roller coaster. There were so many times where they could have pulled the trigger on him, whether it was the Survivor Series moment, or the cash-in, or the feud with The Miz, and for whatever reason, they just never decided to go with it. But while Dolph Ziggler was never a top star in the WWE, his run without a doubt was a very good run, and it was a very solid run, and Dolph Ziggler will always go down as a great. He was extremely solid in the ring, brilliant on the mic, and yeah, he had a good run with the company overall, with some very iconic moments. And I definitely wouldn't be against him either returning to the company or popping up somewhere else like TNA or AEW or anywhere else. Dolph Ziggler is definitely a credit to the wrestling business.